Welcome to our course on integrating Houdini and Unreal Engine. I'm Eldad Sery and I'm excited to guide you through this journey. You'll learn how to harness Houdini's powerful procedural capabilities alongside Unreal Engine's real-time creation strength. We'll start with Houdini basics, covering installation, UI navigation, and fundamental geometry. You'll create proxy objects, understand procedural workflows, and build complex networks for set tracing tasks. You will also design user-friendly interfaces, integrate assets, and control various parameters within Unreal Engine. If we're already familiar with the basics of the programs, feel free to skip the introductory chapters. In this course, you have files and materials you can use. Each topic includes exercises and challenges to help you understand and implement the material, ensuring you can build and customize tools for your own projects. Good luck, and let's begin. Welcome to the basic Houdini section. In this chapter, we'll cover fundamental concepts and techniques to help you get started with Houdini. Whether you're new to 3D animation or transitioning from other software, this section serves as a solid foundation for understanding Houdini's interface, workflow, and essential tools. From navigating the user interface to creating basic shapes, manipulating objects, and exploring key features, we'll go over the essentials step by step. By the end of this chapter, you'll have a clear understanding of Houdini's basic operations, enabling you to follow our tool building and dive deeper into this amazing, powerful, and robust program. Let's dive in and unlock the creative possibilities of Houdini. Enjoy. If you don't have a license yet, you can go to SideEffects website and download Houdini Apprentice. You can Google Houdini Apprentice download, and the first page that you're going to see is a download page. You can choose either by downloading a small launcher and install from there, or download a specific installer file. For our tool, we're going to use SideEffects Labs. Labs tools are a set of tools developed by SideEffects to help achieve many tasks with ease. You can see more about it in SideEffects Labs page. We're going to check in Houdini if labs are installed, and you can also get assistance in this page. To make sure labs are installed, you can either go to Houdini in the shelf area that we have it installed. You click the plus sign, shelves, and scroll down till you get to SideEffects Labs. Here, if you see all of these icons, it's already installed. If not, we have an update toolset that takes us to the launcher to install. Or you can go to Labs packages and see what's installed. Once we have labs installed, we're going to have access to a lot of nodes in the labs area. You can see them here by subject, and we're going to go through the most important ones for our tool. Let's start with an overview of Houdini's interface. Here above, we have the main menu. You can find commonly used options and operations like new file, opening, saving, importing, etc. Here is a shelf area where you can find commonly used nodes and operations. You can also add specific shelves here in the plus sign, shelves. Here in the big area, we can see what we've created. We can also see different viewports, top, front, right, and we can also scroll between them with the numbers. 1 is a perspective, 2, top view, 3 for front, 4, right, and 5, we can see the UV viewport. We'll go through this later. We can also have a split view. If we press here, we have different types of splitting, but let's go with the 4 view. And we can see in parallel perspective, front, top, and side view. Here is a toolbox where we can find transformation, snapping, options, etc. In the right, we can see the display option area. Here is a parameter area. We can see our selected nodes, options, and parameters that we can adjust. Here is a network editor where we can see our network and nodes and manipulate them. Down here, we see the play bar. Here, we see the status line. And now let's see everything in use. Here, I just created a sphere. We can see the representation in the 3D view. We can see the parameters that I can edit. And here is a node and the beginning of our network. I can adjust many parameters here. And we're going to see how to work procedurally soon. Now I'll create another node that makes a noise. Here I'm adjusting the subdivision level. Here I adjust the noise level. This concludes our basic overview of Houdini's interface. If you want to see more about it, you can see in Houdini's page, but don't worry, we're going to use it a lot. In this section, we'll cover the fundamental operations of Houdini to get started. Houdini has 4 main areas: the network editor, parameter editor, 3D view, and the timeline. The network editor is where you create and organize nodes, while the parameter editor allows you to adjust node settings. The 3D view provides a real-time preview of your scene, and the timeline is used for animation. Let's create some primitive shapes. There are several ways to create basic shapes in Houdini. We can go to the shelf tabs here under Create and just press on the primitive that we want. Then we can place it. After the initial placement, we can play with the transformations. We have Move, Rotate, and Scale. Under each transformation, we can play with specific axis or plane or free movement. Under rotation, the same thing. We can go with the axis. The colors here are the same as RGB as XYZ. So red would be the x-axis, blue the z, and y is a green axis. Y is a green, and we can play freely. We can also do a rotation perpendicular to the camera in this circumference. Under scale, same thing. We can do for each axis. We can see the amount. We can have 2 axes. The green here would change x and z and not y. And the same for each plane. And we can have proportional scale if we do it from the middle. This is a transformation we can manipulate from the 3D scene. Usually in Houdini, we're going to do it procedurally. I'm going to show you later how. Everything that we've seen here through the transformation and the 3D scene, we can change in the parameter area. We can put specific numbers. We can reset to defaults, revert to defaults. We can also revert the whole node to the default state here under the settings, revert to factory defaults, and everything is reset. Usually we're going to do these things under the SOP level that we're going to see soon. In the same way, we can do sphere, cube, which is a cylinder. We're going to see soon how to close it and how to play with the parameters. We have a torus, the shape of a ring or donut, and we have a grid. More shapes that we're going to see later. Now we're going to see how to do everything in the SOP level. Let's create a new scene. I'm not going to save it. Here under the network area, I'm going to start a new node called Geometry. This is how we'll usually start. We're going to the network area, either right click or pressing tab. And then we can either filter the name. If we know the name of the operation, we can filter it here, or we can go specifically to where we want and add the node. Here, I've added a geometry node that we can see the same transformation that we saw before. And now we are going to go inside this node and we have a new network. This is how we navigate between different parts of Houdini for material building, rendering, dynamics, and more. Here, I want to go back to the SOP level. SOPs are service operators. I double click it. And again, I right click to get the menu. And we can see that we have very different operations. All of the nodes I can use to build my object. To begin with basic shapes, I can right click in an empty area, go to Geometry, and primitives. These are the same nodes we saw before: box, sphere, torus, cube, grid, and we have more. When I create this node, the center point of the object is created at the origin. We can play with the parameters like size, placement, rotation, and scale, global scale. We can have different methods of creating. We're going to leave it at polygon mesh. And we're going to leave it at quads. But we can do other things like building only the lines. But we're going to start with regular faces. There's a very convenient way to manipulate parameters in this area. I can press the mouse middle click in the area I want to change. And then I have this ladder that I can scroll right and left to manipulate this parameter. I can either do it like here with decimal points, or if I go up the ladder, I can do it in full numbers and even greater numbers. Usually, full numbers would be easier to rotate, and other nodes that I need higher numbers. Something more precise, I can go to those. I can also manipulate the number of divisions to each axis. Houdini's procedural nature allows for non-destructive editing, meaning we can go back and adjust these parameters at any time. Controlling the camera is very easy in Houdini. I press Alt in the keyboard and left click of the mouse to rotate, middle click to move, and right click to zoom. The camera manipulation in Houdini, pressing Alt in the keyboard and each of the mouse buttons. Alt and left rotate, Alt and middle click, and mouse middle click to pan, and Alt and right click to zoom in and out. To focus on my object, I press F and see my object. By the way, now we have only one node. When we can see the blue area here, it means the 3D scene looks at this node. In Houdini, we can display, group, manipulate any number of components. The first component is a point. Second is edge. Third is a primitive, which in other programs we know as face. In this series, we're going to see many ways to manipulate them. Many times we would like to see a better representation of points and primitives, as well as normals. Here on the right section, we can choose this icon to view our points. We can see them by numbers here. We can display their normals here. When we want to see our primitives representation, we can press here to see the primitive number, and here to see their normals. If we want to see more information about our object, we can hover on the node, press the little I here, or either middle click on the node, and we can see that this node has 8 points and 6 primitives. Let's look at curves in Houdini. I start the same way as we usually do. Right click, Geo, open a geometry node, go in, and now I can start building my network. I right click on an empty space, write Li to filter everything with this name, and create a line. A line node creates a straight line with specified amount of points. We have several types of primitives, but we're going to use polygons for now. And we can interactively change the amount of points. Here I change the amount, but I don't see anything. If I go to the node and press the I can see the information here. Now I have 10 points, 1 primitives, 10 vertices, and 1 polygon. If I want to visually see how many points I have, I can press the button here and see all the points. Now it's easier to see how many segments and points I have. I can also manipulate the length direction. I want it to be on the x-axis with a certain size and specific divisions. It's very easy to see. Next, we're going to see the curve tool. I right-click, start to write curve, and press the curve node. Here, I have two nodes. I have the line node, where I can see the eye. This is a display and render that I can see in the 3D view, this node. If I want to see the curve node in the 3D view, I need to press the eye or to go to the node and press R. I go to the node, press R. Node, R. Here, I don't see anything because I haven't created the curve yet. To start creating the curve, I can go to the Show Handle tool, or I can press Enter to start creating it. Each time I press the view, I get a new point. To finish, I press Enter, and to go out of this mode, I press Escape. Here's my new curve. The curve is being created on a viewport. If I want to create it on the floor, I can press 2 to see the top viewport, press Enter, create my new curve, Enter again, or Escape, press 1. And as you can see, I can have several curves closed or opened in this node. Let's now create a freehand curve. I can right-click, write Draw Curve, go to the display and press Enter, draw anything I want. And press Escape to go out. We'll soon see how to create the smoother lines and how to manipulate the curves. The Draw Curve node lets me draw on several planes. I can go to Projection and decide what plane I want to draw on. It could be any one of the main planes, but I can also draw on geometry. Let's see. I can draw on YZ, press Enter, draw a curve, go to ZX, which is the floor, draw this curve. I can draw on the screen. I can draw on the screen plane, and I can also draw on specific objects. I need to go to Geometry, and here in this node, you see that I have two inputs. Now I can create the geometry I want to draw on. Let's create a sphere. Connect the sphere's output to the Draw Curve input. By the way, I can hold the mouse on the input or output and see what it does. So this is the output. And here, this is a projection object. This is the first input. We're going to see a lot more on inputs and outputs when we build our tool. So let's create a connection. Let's create a connection by dragging from this point to this point, from the output to the input. I want to make the sphere a bit bigger. Let's take it to the side. Here I can see the sphere because I have the Show Guide Geometry on. I can take it on or off. And now I can start drawing on the sphere. To create a circle, right-click, choose a circle node. We can decide how many divisions we want. The default type is closed, but we can change the arc type here to open and get a circle. Again, we have control on what plane we want it, how many divisions. If we want it open, There are many other ways in Houdini to create curves. I want to show another one and then we'll see how to manipulate them. Now I'm going to create a spiral curve. I right click it, start writing spiral till I can see in the node list. If I want to focus on this node, I press F. And this is a very nice node to create spirals. I can decide where it starts, how many segments it has. I can change the height, changes the height while making the spins, how many turns. By the way, we have different types. You can play with it. There's a nice way to create more than one. And I can even create a ramp, not to have it distributed evenly. I can have more weight at the beginning, or take it up and have very interesting shapes. Let's now see how I can control the curve after it was created. Let's create a new curve. Press enter. I'm going to connect another node after the curve. I take the output, drag it to an empty space, press tab, and now I write the name of the node. I'm going to use resample node. To see the result, I press the little eye icon here. And now I see that the resample node automatically created a bunch of new points. There are several ways to manipulate the amount of points. In this method, we see that it's being created by the length. So every 0.1, it creates a new point. I can take the number up and it creates less points. If I need more precision, I'll make smaller divisions. The smaller the number, it creates more points. In the second method, I can choose how many points I want. I'm going to close this check mark, press the maximum segment check, and here I can decide how many points I want to be on this curve. If I want the curve to look less segmented and broken, and I want it to look more curvy, I can change the type here. Instead of straight edges, I can go to subdivision curves, and here the more segments I'm adding, it's being more round. It works the same in this method. And this is how I can create from this input line with very little points. I can create something round, and in our tool we're going to see a lot of usage for that. Let's see how I can see my curve as a surface and create a profile on it. I take the output of the resample, go to an empty space, press tab, and I'm going to use a sweep node. Pressing the node, pressing R, and now I'm looking at the sweep node. In the 3D scene it looks that it's empty, and I see an error. By default, this tool is looking for a second input, and it doesn't have one. So, in the surface shape, I press, instead of second input, I choose round tube. And now I can see a tube around my curve. I can manipulate the radius and how many segments I want around the curve. There are many other parameters I can play with, and we'll see them later on. Utilizing Houdini's procedural workflow, I can go back to a node in the network and change any of the parameters to see everything being propagated down, and I can even go to the input and change the initial input. There are several ways to use curve as input. Here is a sample curve. This is a node called copy to curve. It takes this model and copy it along the curve. This is another node called copy to point, which takes every point on the curve and puts a model on it. Very helpful if we want to control how many instances or how many duplications we want, and we can assign specific attributes to it, like color, size, orientation, etc. And here's another node called chain, but in this case, I took a box, a very big box with divisions, and put it on the curve, and now it deforms on the curve. If I make it smaller, it adds as many duplications as possible to meet the curve size. Here's an example in Unreal using a curve as input for the whole tool. This is a curve. You can change the amount of hang, the randomness between them, the number of assets that we're copying. These are assets from your own game. This is from Unreal starter content. In this example, we can have a cable or not, and we can choose if we want this vine or just the cable. In order to see Houdini's procedural workflow, let's build a little example. I'm going to start with a grid. Let's add divisions. And I'm going to add a node called mountain. This is a node that creates a digital noise. There are a few ways to add nodes to our network. I can right-click or tab on an empty space, write the beginning of the name of the node, and then it filters it so I can easily find the node. Then I need to make a connection. I can either take from the output to the input or the other way, but I need to make a connection. The other way, I can build a node, right-click. I have a history here of the nodes I used. I can press J and draw a line somewhere in the vicinity of both the input and the output. I can easily cut the connection either by press Y and have the scissors on it, or press the connection and delete. So again, either connecting or pressing J and draw a line to have the connection. Another useful way I like is grabbing the output, going to an empty space, pressing tab and creating the node. It creates a connection automatically. And another way, if I would like to have a node between these two nodes, I can hold the connection, move it a bit, press tab or right click, and have another node in between. Working procedurally is a non-destructive way of working. I can go to each of the nodes at any point, change parameters, and have the changes propagate down the network. At any point I can visualize each of the nodes I would like to see, and I can bypass it or lock it. I can take a node out of the network by grabbing it and wiggling it outside of the network. And then it's not connected, so the grid is connected directly to the mountain. If I would like to add a node that already exists in the network, I can grab it and just it snaps to the network. Each node has 4 options. Display, this is a display and render flag. With this blue representation, it means that I'm viewing this node in the 3D scene. Don't be confused because I can see the node here, but play with parameters. Here are the parameters of the node that I'm selecting. It's not the same thing. This is a transform node. I put 1 on the translate Y. We can see by the colors, and this is X, Y, Z. Here the transform node takes the input, takes it 1 unit to the Y-axis, and then it continues down the network. If I would like to see the network without this effect, I can press the button here. This is called the bypass. The node gets dimmed and the network bypasses, doesn't see this effect. It's a very useful way when we are debugging things to see what these nodes brought to the network. Let's say this mountain, I can play and see the whole effect. Sometimes I would like to see a part of the chain or a part of the object as reference. When I'm hovering, I can press the purple one. This is called a template. And now I have a node as a reference. I can have the mountain as a reference and the grid as the one I'm viewing. It doesn't matter the order. The last state is locked. This is a red one that is used when I don't want to see changes that are happening before. Let's say I have this one locked and we're viewing it. I go to the transform and have another number, and we don't see the change because this is locked and we're viewing it. If I release the lock, it prompts if I want to do that. And once I do that, I can see the effect. I can move up and down the network with page up and page down in the keyboard. In each node, I can change parameters to see the effect. I'm taking the mountain, and I can change the amplitude. Element size is the frequency. I have several noise types that I can play with. And the beautiful thing about working procedurally, that at any given point I don't have enough density or enough information here, I can go back to the grid, add more rows and columns to see it with better resolution. In my viewport, I can choose to see with wireframe or without, pressing W from wireframe to shaded mode, and Shift W shows a wireframe on shaded or regular view. We have many other display states that we can see here. In Houdini, I can take each parameter I'm using and reference it and use it with other parameters. Let's see an example of it. Here, I take a cube and I can play with the size and with the height. And a nice trick, if I want this cube to be always on the floor, I can take this number, divide it by half because this is the middle point, and have the center start from there. So let's say this is 3 units. I would like the center to be at 1.5. Then it's always on the floor. The nice way in Houdini that I can have this number and reference it anywhere I would like. I right click here, select copy parameter, then I right click where I would like to use it and choose paste relative references. Now you can see that this number is some sort of expression that reference to this number. I can press the title and see the actual number, or press again to see the formula. Now this number refers to the same number 3. If I would like to have it half the size, I press here again and just add a small formula. At this time it's divided by 2, press enter, and now every time I change the height, this number is being divided by 2. There are a few ways to organize our network and to visualize our nodes. These 2 icons open small menus to help us visualize our nodes. With this palette, I can change the node color. When we have big networks, it helps us find our nodes when they are distinguished in different colors. It doesn't change the color of the object, it changes the color of the node. The other menu gives us options for different shapes. We can have different shapes for our node. We have the same functionality, same colors, but with different shapes. It's very easy when we build our own tools or have custom nodes that we would like to see differently, we can give them a different shape. The shortcuts are C for the colors and Z for the shapes. When our network gets too complicated, we can organize it by using the hotkey A. I can choose any number of nodes, press A, and with the mouse button drag to the direction I would like. If I want these 2 nodes to be in the same line, I can press A and drag to the right. If we want all of these nodes arranged down, we can take from this point, this node, without selecting anything, pressing A and dragging down, then it takes everything down. The same way I can drag everything up, but in this case I have a lot of things that are not connected. It won't look as good. It just look a bit messier, but we can still use it as a starting point to arrange our network. Another nice way, which doesn't always give the best result, but nice to start, select everything, press L, and then it tries to organize automatically. Like we saw before, not always the best result, but it's a good start. Another useful thing is having a grid that we can snap nodes to it. We can go to Tools, and here's a Show Grid. We can have grid points or grid lines, and then have things snap to it or not. Everything I showed here doesn't change functionality, but just the visibility of the network. There are 2 ways to visualize the connection, either by straight lines, or if I press Shift S, we can have these curvy lines. We can toggle between them with Shift S. A very useful way in Houdini to select and manipulate part of our object is grouping them together. There are many ways to create groups, and then we can use them. Let's start by adding a group node. By default, this node selects all of the components in object. We can group it by type of component that we would like. Let's start with points. And now we see that it selects all the points. We can uncheck it. Now we don't have anything in this group. We have several methods of grouping things. Let's start with the bounding regions. I enable it. And here I can either choose the size of the selection I would like, or I can even connect to the second input here a specific object that would be the region. So let's do it now. Let's add a box. I can reference it to see where the box stands. Let's take it up a bit here. So this is a box. I connect it to the second input. And here, under bounding box, instead of having its own bounding box, I can select and ask it to use the bounding object that it's connected to. And now I have this box drives the selection of the points in the sphere. Obviously, everything we can change, and it's all fully procedural. Let's give this group a name. And now this group called selection would have all of these points connected to it. Let's now move these points together. Let's now connect a transformation that will use this selection. I do a transform node, look at it. There is no group connected. So when I do the operation, everything is affected. I can either specify the primitive number if I know it. So let's say primitive number 0. Here it's this one. Or I can do 0 to 20 or to 200. Now all of them are affected. Or I can press the select button here, select the primitives that I would like to use, enter. And now the transform here operates only on this selection. The same way, I can use the group that I already created. The group type was points. The little arrow here to select from the list of groups that this object has. And now the group called selection, which was created by this box, has this transformation. I can go back to the box, play with the size or placement, and see the effect that I created. Let's add another node to color them. Let's take the selection, point, and give them a red color. And now these points are moved and colored. And I can always play with either input or any node in the network. There is a distinction between groups and attributes. The color that we just put is an attribute, and grouping defines which point or which component belongs to what group. We can have several groups and attributes to control our object. Here we have other two useful grouping methods. The first one is group by range. I named it range, selected primitives, and had it select one primitive out of every two. I can make it out of 3, 4, and I just colored it to see the effect. We can offset the selection. Here I chose to color the primitives, but it can drive any operation. The other node is group by expression. Here I selected points. The group name is chance. We select randomly and can add a range. This node is called group by expression. We can write with vex and expression to drive the creation of the group. Here's another node called group promote, which we can take any type of component and promote it to a different type. We can change the name, keep the original, and do other things. Here also I colored the primitives. As always, we can go back and change parameters to see the effect. As you know, we like to give a challenge exercise at the end of each topic. Create a Houdini network that incorporates curves, geometry, and colors to build basic objects. Use the techniques that we saw here to build your network. Try using geometry primitives like sphere, cubes, grid, also the tools that we saw to create curves and lines, to build basic shapes. You can color each one. You can combine objects by using the merge node. Let's see how. Let's create a sphere, a tube, and a box. We can see each one independently. If we want to see them together, we can create a merge node. Right click, merge. Here, each node has one input, but the merge has multiple inputs. So I can take the sphere to the merge, display it, and then each node I'm adding, I can see it as well. We can also move them so they won't hide each other. Let's take the box a bit down. I right click, transform. Let's take it up a bit. If I want to duplicate this node and use it, I can alt click and drag, and then snap it to place. Here we can do it in different height. If we want to color each one, again, I grab the line, right click, color. I can right click on an empty space, color, or tab, pick from the history, and then place it on the line, or take it and snap it to place. If I want to see it more organized, I can press Shift L. I can change the color. By completing this challenge, you'll gain practical experience in creating and manipulating basic objects in Houdini. Your finished objects will demonstrate your understanding of fundamental concepts and serve as a foundation for further exploration in Houdini. Enjoy!